To be kind today. The meeting is now streaming live on Facebook. That seems to be a good indicator. And let's double check to see if Zoom is telling the truth. Amazing. We are live. Let me go ahead and start this recording. There we go. Hello, folks of our sweet little pajama-filled Zoom room, and anyone watching along online on the Facebook live stream or thereafter, perhaps YouTube if you're watching in the year 2025. Welcome to Poets in Pajamas, episode 176, featuring the fabulous work of Diana Dalton and Amy Beth Sisson. We are so thrilled to have these two. It was actually a funny way by which Gardner, my co-host, and I came across these two submissions, as Gardner had read Amy Beth's work before, and I have read much of Diana's work before. And so we said, how about we switch these submissions? And both of us loved the other just as much as we have loved the work of the formers. And so we now have this beautiful pairing together, here to share some fabulous work tonight. While you're listening along, if you have any comments or any ideas to ask to the poets, go ahead and write it up in the chat. Or if you hear a line in a poem that just really resonates with you, toss it in and shout out what really resonates with you about our sweet folks' work. At the end of both readings, which will be back to back, we will have a Q&A session. So if you are thinking to yourself, I've got a question I would like to ask Amy Beth or Diana or both, go ahead and write that down too so you don't forget it. I promise you think it won't happen to you, and then 40 minutes of beautiful poetry happens, and then that question is long gone in the sea of fantastic words. Without further ado, we will get started with our first reader, Amy Beth Sisson, who lives near the skunk cabbages in a town outside of Philly. Her poetry has appeared in One Art, Cleaver Magazine, The Night Heron Barks, Ran Off with the Star Bassoon, Philadelphia Stories, The Shout Flower, and others, and is upcoming in Hot Pink Magazine. Sundress Publications selected her manuscript, I Instruct My Toad, How to Write Poetry, as a semifinalist for its 2022 Chapbook Contest. She received her MFA in poetry for 2023 at Rutgers Camden and is an associate artist with the Institute for the Study of Global Racial Justice and an editorial and special projects assistant for Fence Publishers, a fantastic publisher. Amy Beth, take it away whenever you're ready.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Aslan, and I'm honored to read with Diana. I feel like there's a resonance between our work, so I'm really happy to be here. And I'm seeing people from all different parts of my life, and I'm just delighted to see you in the little boxes. I'm gonna have to take off my glasses to read since my eyes are old. So I took the brief seriously, and I've got my pajamas on. So I like to use lines from poems that I love in my work. And the title for this one comes from Keats' Ode on Melancholy. The poem's called Whose Strenuous Tongue. I no longer menstruate or lubricate, but implicate. No longer predicate or adequate, but sometimes kumquat, bitter pulp and sweet rind. So my bio mentions the skunk cabbage, and these next two poems are a series of angry flower poems. They're in letter form, they're epistolary, and this one was written after a walk in the woods in Swarthmore, and it was published in the Shout Flower. With kind regards, Simplicarpus fetidus. You think I am my oval spadix, studded with a crown of unpetaled flowers. You think it's me hidden in the purple-red spathe, hot, hooded, cleft, incurved. You think I am my stink, the skunk reek I emit when you crush me, rip my tender foliage. I am furnace. I am chemical heat. I push through February ice, melt Earth's winter coat, and bloom. Wet is my home. That swamp you keep promising to drain is rife. Ground yielded will shift and crater under your monuments. My flowers and leaves may die before summer's end, but my true life is underground. Each year, my contractile roots draw me deeper into the mud I prefer, binding the soil to the banks of the creek. You dig and dig, but you cannot get to the depths of me. Okay, another angry flower poem. This one was written after a walk at Firefly, where I saw the amazing plant Tipularia discolor. With kind regards, Tipularia discolor. You don't see me on the wooded trail. When you do glimpse me, you don't think sex. You don't think hothouse tropicals whose vaginal flowers and namesake testicle corm set up expectations for sexy pleasure. My inflorescence, a single stalk of brown blossoms, grows low in the leaf litter. I don't scream orchid. You characterize my habits as colonizing, secondary, pioneer, yet call me crippled. You think my adaptive floral asymmetry is brokenness. You call my pollinator the true army worm moth. To you, it's a pest. When it devours your corn and hay, you spray poison. You call me crane fly after the insect you call mosquito hawk. It does not eat mosquitoes. You misname us all. Your priests say hell is absenting yourself from God's love. For me, hell is the weedless green lawns replacing the forests of the Smokies. After you rip out all of the woods to build your sprawling mansions, I will be gone. I require this habitat, this specific mycelium and bacteria. You don't have the right recipe to grow me in your succession house. Okay, and one more walk in the woods. This one in New York State. And I'm going to use a word EFTS, which is EFTS, which is just a little newt. This is called That Moment When the South Becomes Unrecognizable. After weeks in water, gill feathers dissolve, larvae grow legs and lungs, skin reddens, becomes toxic. Then the creatures crawl into the woods, an annual repetition of Disney's Fantasia walking fish taking its first terrestrial breath before the scene cuts to dinosaurs. Thin-skinned F's scatter forest floor, neon spotted, squishable. Their purpose, eat and grow. Grown, they transform to brackish green, submerge again, tails flatten and fin, effective for underwater propulsion. Gillless, they gasp under pond murk, raise their heads above water and suck air. Okay, so I have another Disney poem. I don't know why. I'm not a particular Disney fan, but this one is called Parasites. Us girls consumed the Monte Cristo named for a fictional count. Ham, turkey, Swiss on white, battered and deep fried. Disney's imitation croque monsieur omits nutmeg-scented bechamel, substitutes red currant jelly. Walt imagineered the Blue Bayou after a Louisiana plantation, Greek revival whitewashed. tracked it with crickets, horned owls, and Foster's minstrel banjo earworm. Oh, doo-dah day. We dined at a table overlooking the Pirates of the Caribbean. Faux bateau processed riders. They were real. We were real, clueless of Disney's invisible hand. Fireflies traced animatronic loops. After dinner, we boarded our pirate boat. Grease, rose, and guts, that first plunge. We shivered, blouses damp with spray, propelled past the auctioneer soliciting our bids, hawking a red-haired woman on repeat. Back home, we cupped summer imagines, docile on our little fingers, sporadically aglow. Illuminated drone shows blinker lightning bugs. We all contracted pinworms. The medication tinged our shit fuchsia. Okay, I'm going to go to my show and tell part. I hope you all can see my screen. This is a painting called Fragonard. In English, it's called The Swing, and I can't remember the French title, so never mind. And I really want you to spend a moment taking a look at it, because this is probably the husband over in the lower right-hand corner, and unbeknownst to him is the lover, who has a wonderful perspective of the figure on the swing. So I see it as a quite creepy image that has this wonderful fluffy pink and green and pastel colors. This is another one that takes a title from a poem I love. This one's from Sylvia Plath's Sheep and Fog. And has anybody else been told that they'd outgrow Plath and not? Starless and fatherless. She vamped clad in the tube of stretchy gold knit with black tulle frothing the hem. I stared as she stripped it down over tiny breasts and hips, flipped it, and pulled it back up. Gift from my stepmom, you can wear it both ways. Her prominent cheeks glowed above the dark foam. No matter how stem-like her neck, I try not to liken her face to Midas's gilded bloom. Her agent said she wasn't too short for catalogs. I need to stay thin to get work, but I miss my ass. Her stepmother, curving a nursing baby in her dimpled arm, admitted us to the high-rise apartment. My friend kept her black-clad back to her famous father's art. I side-glanced to canvas. Pale female reclining on anemic velvet couch. A model's hand snaked through the leg of uncanny pastel panties. Under the gauze peeked delicate labia. Penthouse Fragonard. I won't lie, it made me slick, our shared sickness. 30 years later, I took my kids to see her father's retrospective. We saw her alone, dressed in a coat with leather buttons, houndstooth check of black and honey, face caked with foundation, hair dyed jet, a bright red lip, still insubstantial. I'm glad it didn't rain today. Can you imagine me in a Macintosh with galoshes? Okay, I'm going to kind of torture you a little bit. I'm into a form called the contrapuntal, and it's a poem in 2 columns that you can read down the columns or across the rows. Some people even say it's 3 poems, considering each poem in the column a separate poem. When I read it, I think of it as two poems or even two readings of one poem, but I think it's a particularly effective container for complexity. This next, oh, and I'm going to read them both ways, so you're going to hear each one twice. This one is called pith, which is that white stuff under the skin of an orange or lemon. And it also has a darker meaning. To pith an animal means to disable it by severing its spinal cord. Pith. My estimable mother bequeathed her body to science. As a girl, I loved biographies of doctors. In one, a student heaved. Is that what I want for my career? I tossed out my infant growth chart, underweight, a failure to thrive. Why do I rehearse bitterness, remembering her on a metal bed where she was anatomized in a medical school lab? The proctor slid a glob of fatty flesh into a metal dish, a severed breast. Elegies for mothers trouble me, discarded anguish. Now I am well fleshed, as was she, who somehow delivered me vaginally, a patient etherized upon a table. My estimable mother bequeathed her body to science where she was anatomized in a medical school lab. As a girl, I loved biographies of doctors. In one, the proctor slid a glob of fatty flesh into a metal dish. A student heaved a severed breast. Is that what I want for my career? Elegies for mothers trouble me. I tossed out my infant growth chart, discarded anguish, underweight, a failure to thrive. Now I am well fleshed, as was she. Why do I rehearse bitterness, remembering her who somehow delivered me vaginally on a metal bed, a patient etherized upon a table? Another contrapuntal. This one's called Arc. When I paint with acrylics, I strive to artfully coat canvas with plastic. I want my writing to be painting, to not explain anything. I sought shade. My fellow travelers sought sun. I slathered my pale body with sunscreen. They gave me lapis lazuli set in silver. It greened my neck. Poetry didn't help when, in the woods with a shotgun, I am my mother's daughter. I am my children's mother. I learned point of view from Wild Kingdom, the fox searching for food for her kits, the rabbit escaping in the dim of an underpass. The tattered mendicant reaches out her hand, worries a resurrection bone. When I paint with acrylics, I strive. I want my writing to be painting. I sought shade. They gave me lapis lazuli set in silver. Poetry didn't help when I am my mother's daughter. I learned point of view from Wild Kingdom, the rabbit escaping, the tattered mendicant reaches out her hand to artfully coat canvas with plastic, to not explain anything. My fellow traveler sought sun. I slathered my pale body with sunscreen. It greened my neck. In the woods with a shotgun, I am my children's mother, the fox searching for food for her kids in the dim of an underpass, worries a resurrection bone. So my last poem is a tough one. It's called The Afforestation of Palestine, which afforestation means planting trees. And I wrote it after doom scrolling the horror in Gaza. I always thought that planting trees was always good, but I've learned that's not the case. And again, I chose the contrapuntal because it's a particularly good container for a complex exploration. The Afforestation of Palestine. I've been accused of self-hatred when searching for a clean place to piss. I wet the bunk, changed the bed. Some kid said, the Jews killed Jesus. One girlfriend taught me the Hail Mary. My grandfather escaped with pocket change. I paid to plant pioneer pines. I put nickels in the box, seeking God's love. In most of my dreams, at summer camp on Cape Cod, a counselor hung out my wet sheet, a humiliation flag, sang Onward Christian Soldiers during turbulent takeoffs and landings from the Pale of Settlement. In Hebrew school, I paid to uproot Palestinian olives for Israel in my grandfather's name. I've been accused of self-hatred when seeking God's love, searching for a clean place to piss in most of my dreams. I wet the bunk at summer camp on Cape Cod. A counselor changed the bed, hung out my wet sheet, a humiliation flag. Some kid said, the Jews killed Jesus, sang Onward Christian Soldiers. One girlfriend taught me the Hail Mary during turbulent takeoffs and landings. My grandfather escaped from the Pale of Settlement with pocket change. In Hebrew school, I paid to plant pioneer pines. I paid to uproot Palestinian olives. I put nickels in the box for Israel in my grandfather's name. Thank you all for coming and listening.
Amy Beth, oh my gosh, what a soberingly beautiful poem to end on. Um, Such a frustrating and delicate topic that I feel like is very hard to pen. And I think that is handily just one of the most beautiful ways I've heard that discussed.
Thank
I
you.
also wanted to say, you mentioned people saying that one day you'll outgrow Plath, and it occurred to me the other day I was talking to one of my coworkers, and he kind of looked up for a second, and was like, "I missed Bible study last night," and I was like, "Oh, you missed Bible study? That's interesting. Like, what do you do?" And he was like, "Oh, it's not actually Bible study. Sorry, I just every night I read the Ariel cover to cover."
Oh, wow.
It was like, wow, now that is some commitment to Plath. Uh,
Yeah.
so I think that there are many of us,
Testify.
yeah, testify before the love of the couriers. Um, well, thank you so much, all of you out there. I know have questions for Amy Beth, but you got to hold on to them. You got to write them down, and then in about 20 minutes time, it might be time for you to ask. I'll call on you, not by name, but I'll send out a little feeler. And if you really feel the spirit stirring within you, the spirit of loving craft and poetry, then maybe you can raise your hand and ask. I think we would all love it. But in the meantime, we have very important business to get to. And by very important business, I mean our last reader for the night, that being Diana Dalton, a Knoxville-based writer and filmmaker with a penchant for Appalachian lore. Oof, truth. Her work has been featured in the Pigeon Parade, Only Magazine, Phoenix Magazine, and Hey Alma. Diana, whenever you're ready.
Can you hear me? Oh my God. Hey, Beth, I hate to follow that. That was delectable. The last one, especially in the angry flowers. Ooh. All right. Let's hope I can live up to it. So I am going to start with, I often write from a place of, I see something and there's a line or a title in my head, and then I have to drop whatever I'm doing and think about the very mundane thing I've just seen. So this is Overripe Pineapple. Oh, were we ever excited to cut into you? And those first few bites were saccharine sweetness. I was the only one you bit back. Tongue left lolling in my mouth like a pincushion, karmically dealt with for my dare of indulgence. Thinking of delicious futures you were put away, Tupperware with red snaps. Foolish time consumed us. You became an artifact, behind olives and salsa and homemade frosting in a mug. If I opened you now, I think bromelain would spill out like mustard gas, and it'd be such a waste to die with the fridge open. In your transparent tomb, you're perfect. Poisoned time capsule of what could have been. Thank you. All right, that was a light one to start. Here is another observational, relatively short piece. This is titled and begins, "To the field mouse dead on the trail. Your glossy eyes must be wiser than mine, open in death, wrapped with the world, wholly a part of it. You are so much like the others that you could not die if you wanted to. So cosmically unique that you are a universe destroyed. How lucky you are, predestined, to return to the soil and still sweet air. As for myself, I'm not so sure. I pray, and I am not the type to pray, that your breath was taken back in an instant, that the night sky was the last thing you saw. I pray there were stars." Another poem with stars in it. Or, yeah. This is called Vapid. This place demands poetry, haiku, ghazal, sonnets. This place demands lyricism, so my pen comes up empty. The stars here are beautiful, not like diamonds or twinkling eyes, not at all like the way the light hums off the lake by the cooling of mosquito hour. Not like melancholic tear welling on bittersweet cheek, knowing it's the last but not the first. No, the stars here are just beautiful like stars. And here's a piece that's more of a collage of observations of lines that came into my head and would not go out of it on a road trip, because we love a road trip poem. This is Traveling Ruminations. I think you are the party dot where cloth meets skin, the reminder this body is not new. The fixed entity does not exist. The world would be more boring if it did. You are the cross that reads Pettermere by the highway. The heron atop it too. You are Alabanza at the yellow light. I didn't believe in haints until tonight. The blue ghosts are out in Tennessee. Just 2 weeks this year. Much too late to clear the room in my heart. I was unprepared for them to occupy. When your heavy eyes are shut, I can't shake the feeling you don't exist. When I close mine, you're the only thing that does. And I am a radio left on scan. Let me think. So, Amy Beth, I loved your last poem so much. And here is another written by a quote unquote self-hating Jew. I'm joining the club. This is Treif. Be here now. If now is a kosher market upstate, and I'm tugging down my sleeves with hands just as tattooed. You asked me not to write about what happened at Havdalah, so I do not. Instead, I remember this morning, the scissor blade wrenched from its twin, the mango bleeding out between clutched fingers, the sun already burning, this morning. The chickens squabbling for mango flesh, not knowing their pasts and certainly not their futures, but envying their presents. The mango blood avalanching Treif v-necked chest and muddy toes, not yet draped. Shameful vigilance of tzitzit lashed eyes. I used to think I wanted this, but I would rather be seen eyelessly. A lot of these poems are fresh from summertime. So if that's sort of the vibe that, I don't know, something about the sun lets me write. A poem from summer. This is Brambles, Baby. My body betrays me again, but salt water tells me I am enough, or blessed nothingness. I maintain a healthy fear of gynecologists, mascots, the ocean at night. I call this self-preservation. You scare me in several ways, which I will not list here, because I think we understand each other. Your arms, too, are darker than your breasts. You once called a farmer's tan the rallying beauty mark of proletariat would-be-s. With hands and pumice, we can never seem to gouge the calluses from our heels, and why should we? We are gorgeous when we skin our darker arms on blackberry brambles, baby, and on keep-away fence tops. We talk bad movies and dying breaths of the campfire glow, and where our food comes from, and why you don't believe in an afterlife. I believe in the stray ember on your big toe that you fail to notice, and you. Thank you guys for the snaps I see. Thank you, so much energy. This poem from the summer, of course. I had a very good poetry summer. Climate anxiety, subtitle or subcaption, better keep this one short. Lord, if vice is to escapism as you are to the sublime, why do we stare across the round table with such a tepid silence growing between us? Lord, why does the sea corrode my toes until I'm no longer flesh but bone? From the train window, I saw herons plodding ankle deep. Do herons have ankles? In what used to be an oasis, and at the Croton Harmon platform, a woman coating her nails. Fire engine red. Anyways, if I think too much about it, I won't be able to write for the weeping. If I think of a better idea for a poem, then I'll tell you. And this is, wrote a lot of short, medium poems this summer, and I accidentally wrote a companion piece to climate anxiety. And this one goes, on my affinity for non-destructive tailoring in a dying world. Nihilism, like coriander, is best prescribed for dishes where its absence would be noticed. Since the spaceship Earth is drowning, I will perfect my backstroke. With the stars, our last taunting atoms to conquer, it is with great glib and gusto I will steal them with my eyes. Since I will not halt the world burning, I will merengue with new friends who feel ancient, patch holy-assed trousers, sharpen sticks for the marshmallows. Thank you. Oh my goodness. I'm going to skip around a little bit in the interest of time. Let's see what tonight feels like. I like this one. This is Confessions That Only Exist at Midnight. But I am in my pajamas, but we'll have to retitle this Confessions That Only Exist at whatever time zone you are in at the moment, because that's what it's going to be. Sometimes my chest heaves until there is nowhere left to put my heart. Sometimes I am nothing more than a still from a film that does not exist, as close as any living thing to bliss and twice as hungry. I have been to places where the veil between death and life felt thin. I have seen shadows of shapes I swore were human along lone and moonlit Appalachian highways. But this is just another game I play with God. My God does not play chess with the universe. My God plays tipsy solitaire by the microwave light. My God sticks chewing gum on an unbent bobby pin to fish my fate from where it's fallen between radiator slats. Gum that jumps back in her mouth, dust bunnies and all, to become the glue that binds together parents and their children, road salt to snow tires, me to you. When I spoke to the trees, they agreed with me. It was harder to grow in rocky soil, but more rewarding. There are haints in these hills, but most mean you no harm. Be merciful to small things, which will outlive us all. In becoming my own, I emulate Rock Priestess Patty, my favorite camp counselors, the woman who gathers the stars in the basket and frisbees them across the cosmos, and you. Mm-hmm. I think I'll do one more for time's sake. And I think that I'd forgotten that in my bio for this, I read about my penchant for Appalachian lore, and I have a lot of Appalachian poems. So we're going to end aptly with, I'm sorry it had to end this way. They call you the vine that ate the South and other unsavory taunts. But I call you my savior. You never asked to devour the soil of these shores. Let me lay down on a bed of you, and you could eat me alive for a change. Megacopta cribraria, the kudzu beetle, was my father. Please don't use my government name. I bet you thought they'd welcome you. With Southern hospitality's molar-wide smile, all the sunlight that drips from its lips to fall on sidewalk dandelions. I imagine I am the quintessential American, gagging on the dreamscape of China-made fireworks. Our neighbor, do you miss her? If they'd let me, I'd be a good patriot, dutifully ending the evening with fewer fingers than I began it with. I guess I thought the din would quit. It's only an echo now, from far on your captor's shores. Less fireworks, more cicadas. They're hardy things like you, aren't they? 17 years underground. There's so much they've missed. The end of the world brings radium white sunsets, charlatans, deities, those who are both. Old holler graveyards are lucky enough to be forgotten. Dew no longer corrodes granite faces.
Diana, thank you so, so much. I mean, even at a personal level, ending it with cicadas and kudzu, two things I really never thought I would miss as much as I do living on the coast. But wowza, so beautiful, so stunning, and also stars. I mean, more star poems. I know people are writing about stars, but more, right? I mean, folks, can we get a little poll? More star poems? Yeah. Thank you so, so much. This is the time I forewarned about, folks. This is me pointing to you and saying, hey, if you've got a question you would like to ask one of our two lovely poets, go ahead and pull them up. You may throw it in the chat and I will ask on your behalf, or you can raise your hand using the little raise hand function or with your physical hand, and you can ask them yourself. As you think, and in the meantime, I am going to start us off with a few questions. The first of which is the question we always like to ask our readers, that being, outside of the literary field of books, what have you been obsessed with recently that perhaps has been promoting you to creativity? If you also would like to do a little digression to plug your favorite book of the moment, you absolutely may. But I'm curious what else is bringing you to the page, or in Diana's case, with filmmaking to the screen. Perhaps Amy Beth will start with you and move to Diana.
Starting with lockdown, I started doing a series of drawings with like the kinds of magic markers you get for little kids. Some of them are even scented. And most of the drawings are of flowers or insects or frogs. And I find it a really centering practice. So part of the obsession are things that show up in my poetry, obsession with plants. And part of it is the act of putting down on the page what you see instead of what you think you see.
All right. So inspirations. Inspirations that aren't poems I've been reading. Going swimming in natural bodies of water. Swimming in rivers with rocks you can clamber up, and then floating on your back. You know, maybe feel something like tickle past your feet, and maybe it's alive, but you don't think about it too much in the moment. No, you think about it after. I've been getting into, I worked at a summer camp this summer, and I got a lot of new music recommendations from the kids, a very diverse lot of music. So that was fun. And I will unfortunately have to plug literature because I've just been on an Ann Tyler binge. I just finished Digging to America, and her characterization just gets me every single time. I don't know if that answers the question, but it's what I've been up to.
That absolutely answers the question. You're making me obsessed with the need to go and float on my back through natural bodies of water. And I live 10 minutes from the ocean, so I may have to do that ASAP, maybe tomorrow at dawn. The next question I want to ask is the question that Gardner Dorton, my co-host, who unfortunately can't be here tonight, loves to ask to all of our readers. And that is, if you would ruminate and talk about your process as it comes to drafting in the mediums that you draft in. For example, Microsoft Word, Google Docs, iPhone Notes, Android Notes, pen and paper, Scrivener. How do you find that the idea originally comes to be? And then how do you finalize it? Is there a different way by which you start and how you finish? Amy Beth, we'll again start with you.
I love to take notes on my phone, just in the little notes app, nothing fancy. And I think of them as my poem seeds. So I will just write down, I think similar to Diana, random observations, words overheard on the street, lines from a book. And then I sometimes will collect multiples of them and collage them, as another word Diana used. And I'll put them into Google Docs. I like Google Docs because it keeps the revision history. So sometimes I'm like a crazy reviser. I revise over and over and over again. Some people in the audience here know this about me. And sometimes I'll over revise and I'll need to go back to a previous revision and rescue something that I had edited out. So that's pretty much the other thing I do is I'll then download things and I'll get Microsoft Word to read it out loud to me. I also read my own work out loud to my phone and then listen to it, but I like to have another voice read it. The great thing about that is sometimes I'll add or subtract a word that I think is there or I think should be there but isn't really there. But Microsoft Word will never do that. It always reads every word that's actually there. That's my process.
Lovely stuff. This might offend the notes app poets out there, but it's a last resort when I'm writing a poem on my phone. I am very much a pen and paper person. Pen, not pencil. I don't erase. I'm physically incapable of sitting down and being like, okay, let's write a poem. I wonder what I'll come up with. Something will strike me, usually a line. Usually I find a title first and the poem follows. And if possible, I have to drop what I'm doing and write it out of my head, which very often winds up as these little observational slice of life pieces that will occasionally merge into a hopefully artistic jumble. And then of course I transcribe to also Google Docs, love Google Docs, but I don't do a ton of editing usually from where my poems pour out of my brain onto the page. I really should, because the few times I force myself to, it's greatly beneficial. I'll spend a very long time moving around commas and hyphens and things of that ilk, but very, very rarely do I find myself overhauling the structure or the language of a poem, which I probably should, but that is my most natural state.
I love both of those. Into that final thought, it makes me think of this great line I heard from Hanif Abdurrabkib, a fantastic poet and creative nonfiction essayist. At a talk he gave, he said that writers should write towards constraint and edit toward abundance. I think his meaning was get down exactly what you need to get down and then draw it out, then add everything else in there that you could possibly think of. And I was talking to my students the other day and I was like, who agrees with this? And no one really said anything. And then one girl raised her hand and said, what if abundance is just good? Like, what if we just start with abundance? And that just has been sticking in my mind. What if we just have abundance? So I think just writing with abundance and then kind of looking at it and being like, ah, oh, there you are, and moving on. There's something so beautiful to that. Just constantly moving on to the next poem. Although shout out to the endless revisers, the Elizabeth Bishops out there. You are doing the Lord's work, as it were. I will now open it up to anyone who would like to ask a question. I, as always, have plenty of questions ready to ask, but we would love to hear from you if you have something to ask one or both of our readers. And I'll give it a little time.
We have a question in the chat.
Oh, we do. Thank you so much for alerting me to that. We've got from Caroline Merrill. The poems are often thematically very sobering and feelingful, sometimes even sharply mournful. But since I mentioned moments of humor earlier, could either of you speak to this in your works? Sobering and feelingful, sometimes even sharply mournful, in the context of also having humor. Yeah, that's fascinating. I'll let either of you, if you've got an immediate idea as to that, go.
I can have a go. I love the word feelingful. Ooh, feelingful poems. I love funny moments in poems. I think it's a great way to I think in my pieces sometimes I find humorous asides, which I'd like to find more of. And I think that it's a really nice way as poets to also sort of mask or get past the excruciating pain of being emotionally vulnerable. And I think that when I have funny asides in my work, it's just random shit I think of while I'm writing. I think in one piece I read tonight, I have an aside I say something about herons and then, do herons have ankles? And then a piece about, in my last piece about, the proper way to celebrate the 4th of July being to dutifully end the evening with fewer fingers than you began it with. And Amy Beth, I loved your funny moments in your poems because I think humor is so poignant. I think both of us wrote poems about being bad Jews, and there's also very much a piece of that in sort of our, I don't know, linguistic tradition, and humor as a way to mask and to tactfully get at hard, sticky subjects.
Yeah, I second what you say. And I love your use of the word dutifully in that poem. That was great. I think poetry tends towards darkness, and darkness is a hard place to live in. And I think the function of humor is to help us navigate darkness. Darkness is also a beautiful place to be. I don't want to over promise the glories of light. Darkness is great, it can be velvety and welcoming, but it can also be a little fearful, and humor really helps.
Our next question is from Gabriella. How does performance factor into revisions, if at all? And that makes me think of a kind of a question to tack on to that, with it being the anticipation of performance too. Not only performing it to yourself, but if you know that you have a reading coming up, like this one, perhaps, does that influence how you approach your work at all? Great question, Gabriella. And Caroline Merrill, thank you both.
I'm a huge believer in performance as a revision technique. Zadie Smith once said something like, there's nothing like being in the green room before a reading to sharpen your editorial skills. She said it better than that, but there's something very real about knowing that you're going to be face to face with an audience, reciting your words. Also, when you perform your poems, you think about exactly how you want the voice to be in a way that's harder to do when you're just reading it as words on the page. So thank you for letting me read, and it's a great way to be in revision.
I'll say with regards to performance, well, I'll say now that it's over and done, this was actually my first reading performance. And thank you. And the idea of rehearsing poetry terrifies me. I feel like I know these words that I've written, even a few of the older pieces, so intimately. I was like, I'll be fine. Let's not think about it, because I know with any sort of performance that I'll be nervous. But then when I was reading, it just flows out. I wasn't thinking about the audience. And, 5 minutes before this started, I was like trying to recreate a drink that I had seen in a coffee shop once, like in the kitchen, and there were 6 spoons involved, and it turned out okay. Thanks for asking. And just to keep the mind off, but then once you get in the poetry headspace, it just flows. While I was listening to Amy Beth's work, it was just awash in it. Yeah, but I think that as far as revisions, I will do my precise little edits of moving hyphens and commas and semicolons. Every time I submit work, it'll be the same poem with, a hyphen shifted. And for performing and things like that as well, I still have this imp on my shoulder of thinking of what I could say in front of my parents, which is probably a bad way to work. But
Thank you both so much. I love that part of the way that we're now organizing Poets in Pajamas is with these 2 back-to-back readings, where for many years we were just doing 1 poet per session. And I think exactly, Amy Beth, to what you said about the Zadie Smith quote, something about the community, I feel like it just fills you with the spirit. It's a well that cannot go dry if you're sharing with others. Alone, I think the fear could totally set in and performance anxiety. But Diana, I loved what you said about hearing Amy Beth's work and then feeling the bolster of that. We're all better together. Yeah, thank you both so much for your thoughts. We have time for about one more question, if someone would like to chime in.
Well, I just want to chime in with an appreciation for reading with Diana that, the residences, we both mentioned summer camp. You have stars, I have starless. I sometimes have this feeling like, oh no, I'm writing about many of the same themes that other poets are writing about. There's a famous Lynn Haginian quote that gives me confidence. She says, "We ask that what come out of books be new, but that's impossible. Some themes are incurable." So now I like to think I'm in community with poets like Diana, and we're both communally struggling with these incurable themes. Oh, and Rose says, you just worry about what you can say in front of your children. Disclosure, Rose is my daughter. So yeah, I'm happy to be here with the incurable themes with you, Diana.
I will go ahead and close us out then with a question I've been thinking about since about halfway through Amy Beth's reading, and then Diana, you totally just pulled us home with it. And it's going to be a bit long-winded, as I am wont to do, so bear with me. Um, I hear a lot of poets talking about how important research is to their process, which I think either hits people in a very academic way or in a very freelance gonzo kind of way. I'm going to go out, I'm going to touch the damn salamander, and I'm going to write some salamander poems. Or I'm going to sit down in the library, I'm going to learn the Latin, I'm going to learn family tree, species, etc., for the way that we interface with the non-built environment. And I think both are very valid. They're very different approaches, and I think they tend to produce very different work, if only in the kinds of word choices that get chosen. If you take the academic route, I feel like a verboseness can follow because there's just a wealth of knowledge that you need to translate to the page. And if you take the very gonzo route, I guess I'll say again, I feel like I mean, the idea that the figurative could meet with the literal or the concrete is much more of an easy possibility to grasp. Both of you wrote about summer camp in the outdoors, name dropping flowers left and right and little critters that you love, both alive and passed on. And I'm very curious if you would have a little digression with us, or a progression, depending on how you want to look at it, about how you personally interface with speaking to the world that you must write about. Do you really get into the etymology of the flowers, the ways that they bloom as you prepare? Is that part of your fascination? Or is it a mere appreciation of witnessing the world as it is and then thinking, I can snapshot this on the page? That was probably a 2-minute question, so I hope that it translated well. But just a little rumination, if you've got the brain power for it, on how you interface with these topics.
I think I very much go for the throw it on a page route, and then I'll go back and check myself and fill in details to not sound like a fool. In my last poem, I name dropped the kudzu beetle, who the poem was from the perspective of as Megacopta cribraria, which obviously I Googled. But that was like the one detail or the one thing I fact checked in a poem of longing from the kudzu beetle to the kudzu of whom it has been separated. And I believe just a few other, I'm a sucker for these very mundane, very specific details that I'm trying to think of some in poems that I read tonight, but I think I go mostly word vomit style and allusions. I fill in details when strictly necessary. When incorporating foreign words I can't spell. I think I fact-checked a detail about firefly season in one of these, but I shouldn't say this because I'm a journalist, but the fact-checking is the afterthought for sure.
Yeah, that's great. Also, I want to say there's no rules about how much you revise. It's great if you can effectively write wonderful poetry without this tortuous revision process that some of us like to engage in. That's wonderful. There's no shoulds there. That said, I am a big researcher. I will write a whole, 3,000 word essay. The Palestine poem is actually a 3,500 word essay condensed into that contrapuntal. I feel like I need to seek a lot of knowledge in order to get at my feelings. I guess I start from a cerebral place and I dig down into a more feeling place. Yeah.
Folks, thank you so very much for joining us tonight, both to our dear poets who have been yet again Amy Beth Sisson and Diana Dalton. If you like what we do here at Poets in Pajamas, we are now going to start adding this to the end of each of our readings. We open for submissions for the 2025 series this coming November, usually straight in the middle of the month, around the 15th or the 16th, and we close right before the holiday season fully goes into swing. So if you would like to be in our lovely poets' shoes, reading along to some of your favorite words of yours, please think about submitting to us because we would love to consider your fabulous work. Selfishly, Gardner and I just love reading people's poetry. It's crazy. It's crazy that we get to sit here and do this. That is all for now from me. This has been Poets in Pajamas, episode 176 from Sundress Publications. Thank you so much for joining us, and check in with our WordPress and our Facebook if you would like to stay updated with upcoming readings. We have 2 more this year leading into opening for submissions, that being the, let's see, I believe that in about exactly 1 month's time, we will have a fabulous reading from Rochelle Hurt and Rachel Kaufman. Yes, that will be October 13th. And then at the beginning of November, we will have a fabulous reading that will be, I think, Poets in Pajamas' first fiction reading. I believe we've got some fiction that might be read from Sope Martins and Ellis Idouchi. Or Ellis will be reading poetry, but we will have some fiction, I believe, for you hybrid and fiction folks. So please join in then a month from now and 2 months from now. All right. Peace and blessings to you all. Thank you very much, and we will see you soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.